Hi, this is Max. Today we'll be talking about image generation. So first we will go through the task definition and the paradigm method of image generation. And then we will talk about 6 pivotal papers, which includes latent diffusion model, ImageGen, DAW-E2, Party, PixArt Alpha, and Stable Diffusion XL Turbo. So let's get started. So what was image generation? In the context of year 2015, it was all about unconditional image generation, which, as you can see here, those generated image of human faces are uncontrollable. So there's like lack of controllability. And nowadays, image generation is often referred to text-to-image synthesis, where you can see here we have a text, and then the text, with the text, we can synthesize the image, that the image will be aligned to the text. So how is it done? So for state-of-the-art image generation methods, they actually followed a similar paradigm. In particularly, they will have 3 major components, including a text encoder, a generation model, and a latency decoder. In detail, you will first have a text prompt. By feeding the text prompt into the text encoder, you get the text vector. And then with the text vector and the input latent, you feed them into the generation model, which could be a diffusion model or other kind of models, and it will produce an intermediate latent, which can be visible or non-visible by human. Then you feed this intermediate latent into a latent decoder. Then you will be able to get back a synthesized image that aligned with the text prompt. So the first paper we're going to discuss is the latent diffusion model, which is also stable diffusion. What it does is that it basically denoise in the latent space instead of the data space compared to the traditional diffusion model. So you can see here, it has a VAE autoencoder structure, that it contains an encoder and decoder. And during the training process, the latent was compressed. But how compressed is it? The downsampling factor 8 on the latent is actually the best configuration, such that the latent will be 64 by 64. And in the study, they found that pixel-based LDM requires substantially larger training times, while too much perceptual compression, such as 32, limits the overall sample quality. Then you will see that the latency now is 64 by 64. How about the domain-specific encoder? So during the training process, you have this domain-specific encoder. During the training, it goes through the cross-attention to control how the image is going to be generated. After the training, it becomes like this at the inference process. You have a domain-specific encoder, which is the text encoder, and then you have the generation model. Then finally, you have the decoder, such that this is following the paradigm that we mentioned at first. So with the text, you feed the text into the model, and through the cross-attention, it was able to control the UNet to denoise from a Gaussian noise, so that it was able to produce the intermediate latents here, and finally pass through the decoder such that it was able to reconstruct the image that aligned with the text. So what's the advantage of LDM? Obviously, it provides fast training, right? Because it starts from a lower dimension. And the distribution of the latent embedding is closer to normal distribution. Another great advantage is that you can have tailored autoencoders because it can be applied to not just text, but also graphs, 3D data, etc. Depends on the domain-specific encoder. So there are three core components in the LDM, which we just covered, is the variational autoencoder to encode and decode the latents. Then we have a domain-specific encoder, which in the LDM literature, they use a BERT tokenizer for text encoder. And then they have a unit for diffusion models, which has integrated the rest block and also the basic transformer block. Let's talk about the unit in the stable diffusion, I mean in LDM. So they basically have a ResNet, and then they also have a attention block with the timestamp embedding and also with the prompt embedding. So the time embedding is used to support the denoising process, and the prompt embedding is used to control the generation process. So how is it done? In the basic transformer block, they have the cross-attention module. So it goes from self-attention, cross-attention, and then feed-forward. So the self-attention was used to compute the spatial relation, while the cross-attention allows the text control on image generation. Then what is stable diffusion? Stable diffusion is actually a LDM trained by Stability AI for text-to-image purpose. They trained on a 256-800 GPUs on AWS for a total of 150K GPU hours. They spend almost 600K USD on it. And Stable Diffusion is trained on a relatively huge dataset called Lion 5B, which contains 5B clip filtered image text pair. So it also, for the domain-specific encoder, they also choose to use the clip text encoder instead of the BERT tokenizer encoder in LDM literature. We will talk about why in the later sections. For Stable Diffusion 2 and XL, so in Stable Diffusion 2, they retrained Stable Diffusion from scratch on a filtered Lion 5B data. And they employed a new text encoder, which they moved from clip to OpenClip. So then for SDXL, they retrained the autoencoder on a larger batch size. And also they have a larger 3.5 times larger unit than the original one, such that it was able to produce a larger resolution of output. Then let's move to the next paper. Now, let's talk about image gen. If you look at the image gen architecture, you will see there's also following the paradigm that I first mentioned. You see there is a text encoder, a generation model, and also a decoder. But this time, it was, instead of the latent model, it's using a cascaded model, which we will talk about it in the following slides. And then it also has the keyword called dynamic thresholding to improve the generated images. So what's so special about this paper? Image gen does not involve latent space, and this is cascaded model. And then through dynamic thresholding, it produces high fidelity and photorealism outputs. And then another important insight brought by this paper is that they find that using a large text encoder improves the performance of the image generation. Finally, they present drawbench, which is a challenging set of prompts for evaluation. For cascaded diffusion models, it's actually a paradigm that using pipelines of diffusion models that can generate images of increasing resolution. In detail, they use the noise conditioning augmentation, which is a technique that they find critical towards achieving high sample fidelity. So you can see having this class conditional, bringing it into the later diffusion models. It was able to perform super resolution while maintaining the sample fidelity of the image. In image gen, they also employed a similar technique, but they found that noise conditioning augmentation weakens the information from the low-res models. Instead, they introduced the text conditioning in the super resolution diffusion models as the extra information, and they found that the performance is improved. Another important techniques introduced by ImageGen is about dynamic thresholding. So what it basically does is that it adjusts the pixel value of the samples at its sampling step to be within a dynamic range computed over the statistics of the current samples, such that with dynamic thresholding, you can see the image having like more photorealistic and having higher fidelity. So let's revisit classifier-free guidance. Instead of training an additional classifier, get an implicit classifier by jointly training a conditional and unconditional diffusion model. This is like a barycentric combination of the conditional and the unconditional score function, which they use to trade off for sample quality and sample diversity. So basically, classifier-free guidance is a better method on diffusion models. So at each sampling step, the output is clipped by the same bounds of the training data. In the static thresholding, which is the standard practice, they clip it back to -1 to 1. This makes the image look saturated. But in the dynamic thresholding proposed by ImageGen, it was threshold to first a certain percentile absolute pixel value in the output at each sampling step, and then divide by the S, which is basically normalizing it back to -1 to 1. This prevents pixels from saturation, and the image will look more realistic. So another important insight brought by ImageGen is that they find that powerful text encoders are necessary, and having a better text encoder improves the performance of image generation significantly compared to increasing the unit size. As you can see here, ImageGen was using T5XXL, so which is like a very large text encoder, and they achieved the best clip score while achieving the lowest FID score, which I will explain what is FID and clip score. So just to revisit those basic image generation metrics, FID, also called fetch height in inception distance, it measures the image fidelity of a model. So what it does is that it computes some kind of distance between the real and generated data points distributions, and then the distance will be a range. It will be a value ranged from 0 to infinity, such that a lot of samples is needed because you compare two distribution. You compare the distance between two distribution, so that in order to make it accurate, you need a lot of samples. But I think so. In fact, more than 10K is enough to use, and also a very low distance actually might represent something, because it is only measuring the image fidelity, but it does not measure the diversity of the model. And then we have clip score, which let's talk about clip first. Clip is constructive language image pre-training. It's a pre-trained model trained on 400 million image pairs. And for clip score, it's used to measure the image text alignment using the knowledge from clip. So what it basically does is that Clip has a text encoder, and Clip also has an image encoder. So we employ the frozen text encoder and the image encoder, and then we fit the text image pair into the encoder respectively to get the text vector and the image vector, such that by calculating the cosine similarity between the text and image vector, a higher value indicates that the text is actually more relevant to the image, and while the lower score indicates that the text might not be that relevant to the image. But in fact, clip score only, like the normal range of clip score is like 0.25 to 0.35. So it's relatively hard to spot whether the image text alignment is really doing well. Then we will talk about DOR-E2. So you see here, DOR-E2 actually leverage the clip to perform the image generation. More in detail, it used the clip latents to do it. So first, it learns a joint representation space for text and images. And then at the generation process, it also follows the paradigm of having an encoder, and then a generation model, and then a decoder. So in detail, the text vector, the text was fed into the text encoder, such that the text vector was obtained. Then the text vector is passed into the diffusion models, which in this case is actually, instead of unit, is more like a transformer decoder structure. The diffusion model produced the clip image embeddings conditioned on the image, on the input caption. Then it produced an intermediate latent, which we call the image vector, such that it was passed to the decoder, which is a cascaded super resolution diffusion model to produce the image conditioned based on the clip image embedding and text. So what was the prior model that produced the image clip embedding condition on the image, on the input caption? In the literature, they actually tried two different approaches, which the first approach is autoregressive. They basically quantize the image embedding into a sequence of discrete codes and predict them autoregressively. But they find that the diffusion prior actually performed much better, such that they model the continuous image embedding by diffusion models, which the diffusion model is a decoder-only transformer conditioned on the caption. So about the decoder, the decoder is also conditioned on the clip image embedding and text, where the clip image embedding capture the high-level semantic meaning, and the latents in the decoder model take care of the low-level details, which shares a very similar idea from ImageGen, because their decoder is basically also a cascaded super resolution diffusion model, which it contains one base model to produce the image in 64 by 64, and then two super resolution models to upscale it up to 1000 by 1000.
So this next paper introduces PARTY, which stands for Pathways Autoregressive Text-to-Image Model. Unlike the previous models that are mentioned, PARTY is not a diffusion model. PARTY represents a research effort by Google done in parallel with ImageGen to explore two families of generative models, which are autoregressive and diffusion models. The autoregressive approach by PARTY hinges on the principle of using previous predictions as input to generate subsequent ones, which is a method synonymous with the likes of language translation in NLP. Specifically in PARTY, it treats text-to-image generation as a sequence-to-sequence modeling problem. where image tokens are predicted in the series that corresponds to the sequence of descriptive text tokens. The motivation for this research is to demonstrate the ability of autoregressive models to generate high-fidelity, photorealistic images that reflect the content density and complexity proposed by the textual description. Here are the main contributions of this paper. First, it highlights the model's state-of-the-art performance in autoregressive modeling for text-to-image generation, setting a new benchmark in the field. Second, it marks the consistency of improvements that Party has demonstrated across 4 different scales of its architecture, from 350 million to 20 billion parameters, emphasizing the scalability of the system. Third, this research introduces the Party Prompts or P2 benchmark, a development that provides a comprehensive framework for evaluating text-to-image models. Last, the paper also acknowledges the importance of transparency in research by identifying the limitations of the Party model and detailing these alongside observed error types. So Party is presented as a two-stage model which has an image tokenizer, detokenizer alongside an autoregressive model. To dissect its structure, let's revisit the text-to-image schematic. A text-to-image model begins with a text prompt, which is passed to a text encoder that translates the input into a series of discrete tokens. These tokens are then fed into the generation model, which interacts with an input latent space. Then a model generates the intermediate latents. Finally, a latent decoder interprets these intermediate representations, constructing the output as a detailed photorealistic image that corresponds to the original text prompt. So in the context of the training process in Party, both images and text are converted into tokens. First, an image tokenizer breaks down an input image into the corresponding image tokens, which are essentially the visual syllables of the picture. These tokens are then processed by an autoregressive model, particularly the decoder part of a transformer network. The output is a series of new image tokens. Finally, an image detokenizer reassembles these tokens into coherent generated image that visually represents the initial text prompt. So here's a schematic of the structure as presented in the paper. It follows a two-stage structure. The image tokenizer and detokenizer stage in green and the autoregressive stage in orange and blue for predicting the next image token, given text tokens and the previous tokens. Each of these components is essentially a transformer, so Party is effectively a transformer-based sequence-to-sequence model. Let's first talk about the image tokenizer and detokenizer stage in green. This first stage involves a tokenizer that converts an image into a sequence of discrete visual tokens during training, and training a detokenizer that reconstructs the image from tokens during inference. However, there's a significant challenge, which is how to linearize 2D images into 1D sequences of patch representations. The problem lies in the complexity of images, where even a standard 256 by 256 pixel image with 3 RGB color channels results in 196,000 rasterized values. Previous methods tackle this by learning quantized representations of image patches. However, the Party model introduces a more refined solution. It uses a tokenizer to learn patch embeddings and then maps these embeddings to a visual codebook. Each entry in this codebook corresponds to an indexable location in the latent space. Therefore, it reduces the complexity of the image data. This is achieved using the Vision Transformer or VIT structure combined with the Vector Quantized Generative Adversarial Networks, or VQGAN. Combined is known as the VIT VQGAN. This approach not only streamlines the image data into a manageable sequence, but also maintains the richness of the image's information. Let's now talk about VIT VQGAN in detail. To understand VIT VQGAN, let's start with VQ-VAE. A VAE typically learns a continuous latent representation, mapping input data into a continuous distribution. On the other hand, the VQ-VAE, which stands for Vector Quantized Variational Autoencoder, learns a discrete latent representation. This shift from continuous to discrete encoding is crucial because it can help address issues like the posterior collapse in VAEs, where the model ignores the latent variables because the decoder is too capable. Discrete codes, shown as shown in the encoder part of the slide, represent the input image as a series of integers, which correspond to specific vectors in a predefined embedding space. The decoder then translates these discrete codes back into a reconstructed image. So this is a more detailed description of the VQVAE architecture. The encoder, represented by a CNN, transformed the input image into a set of latent variables, Z of x. These variables are then mapped to a discrete latent space using a codebook that consists of a list of k vectors, each with dimension d. This codebook acts as a lookup table where each embedding vector ei is associated with an index from 1 to k. The mapping from the continuous latent space to the discrete codebook is performed by a nearest neighbor search in the shared embedding space, which is the codebook, and produces the discrete latent variable z. The posterior distribution qz given x is defined as 1 hot where it is equal to 1 if the embedding vector is the nearest neighbor of z of x and 0 if otherwise. The input to the decoder zq of x is then the corresponding embedding vector ek, where k is the index of the nearest neighbor embedding vector. The training involves copying gradients from the decoder input zq of x to the encoder output ze of x. This allows for gradient flow despite the non-differentiability of the discrete latent space. This loss function here that is used to train the network consists of 3 parts. The first one is the reconstruction loss, which measures the difference between the original image and the reconstructed image. The second one is the codebook loss, which pulls the codebook vectors e towards the encoder output ze of x, such that e is a better representation of the encoder outputs, with SG here denoting the stop gradient operation that prevents the gradients from flowing into the encoder outputs. The third one is the commitment loss, which penalizes the encoder output ze of x for deviating from the chosen codebook embeddings e, ensuring that the encoder commits to the codebook assignment. Beta is a hyperparameter balancing term. This loss function collectively ensures that the encoder representations are close to the codebook embeddings while still allowing for efficient reconstruction, and it maintains the integrity of the codebook by having embeddings that are representative of the encoder outputs. So next we'll look into VQGAN, which builds upon the VQVAE structure with several differences. In training, VQVAE uses the L2 loss, which is a standard reconstruction loss focusing on pixel-wise accuracy. VQGAN, however, opts for a perceptual loss, specifically the learned perceptual image patch similarity metric. Perceptual loss differs from the L2 loss by measuring the perceptual similarity between image patches. Additionally, VQGAN incorporates a discriminator, which is trained to differentiate between real and reconstructed image patches. For sampling, VQVAE learns a categorical prior over the latent codes in the codebook from the training images, often employing an autoregressive model like PixelCNN to model the distribution of the latent codes. VQGAN enhances this approach by predicting the next codebook index using an autoregressive transformer model trained with latent codes in training images, likely improving the coherence and quality of the synthesized images by leveraging the transformer's ability to capture long-range dependencies. Here's a schematic of the VQGAN. The first stage involves training the encoder E, the decoder G, and the discriminator D, using the vector quantized loss and the GAN loss. The losses are similar to VQVAE, with this addition of the GAN loss and a modification from L2 to perceptual loss. In stage 2, VQGAN trains the transformer to learn the relationships between codebook entries using the cross-entropy loss. Next, VIT VQGAN further improves upon VQGAN with the following modifications. First, it replaces both the CNN encoder and decoder with VITs. Then it also introduced codebook optimization to improve codebook usage. So first, it uses factorized codes, which applies a linear projection from encoder output to a low-dimension latent space for code index lookup. This decouples code embedding and lookup. Second, it applies L2 normalization on the encoder output latent variables ZE of x and codebook latent variables E. So the resulting Euclidean distance is effectively the cosine similarity of ZE of x and E. Finally, in addition, it also modified the loss functions to be a combination of several losses that are introduced in both VQVAE and VQGAN, including the perceptual loss and the logic Laplace loss. So this is the schematic of the VIT VQGAN structure as presented in their paper. The portion on the right here depicts the codebook optimization part of VIT VQGAN that includes a linear projection from a high-dimensional space to a low-dimensional space. This is the overall schematic in the VIT VQGAN paper. It is similar to VQGAN, but only replacing the CNNs with transformer encoder and decoders. So now we're back to party stage 1. This is the overall schematic of the image tokenizer and detokenizer training with VIT VQGAN. In party, it also uses a super resolution upsampler to upsample the output image to 1024 by 1024 from 256 by 256. So now moving on to party stage 2, which involves the autoregressive model. And it's essentially an encoder-decoder transformer. The encoder is designed to process textual input and convert it into text tokens, utilizing a sentence piece model with a vocabulary size of 16,000 based on a sample text corpus. It has a maximum token length capacity of 128. Meanwhile, the decoder focuses on predicting the next image token in a sequence, taking as input the image tokens generated from stage 1's image tokenizer. The output from the decoder is structured into a fixed length of 1024 image tokens, which correspond to a grid of 32 by 32 tokens for a 256 by 256 image. So 4 size variants of party were trained with 350 million, 750 million, 3 billion, and 20 billion parameters. The encoder and decoder are based on standard transformers, and this configuration prefers larger decoder for generating image tokens, so that decoder has more layers. So for further design considerations, the authors employed text encoder pre-training with the intention to warm start the model, but found that it very marginally helps. So it performs comparably to BERT on glue benchmark after pre-training, but it degrades after full encoder-decoder training. They have listed this difference and unification of generic language understanding and visually grounded language understanding for future research. Here is the training loss graph with and without text encoder pre-training. As seen, the difference is small here. So for sampling, the authors apply classifier-free guidance in the context of autoregressive models, which is used to encourage alignment between generated sample and text prompt. This is similar to the approach made in Make a Scene. They also use re-ranking to batch sample images per text prompt, which is similar to the approach used in DALL-E, and re-rank the outputs based on alignment score of image and text embedding of a contrastive captioners model. So here's a summary of party's training pipeline. Stage 1 focuses on training the VIT VQGAN, which consists of a 32 million parameter encoder to be used as the tokenizer, and a significantly larger 599 million parameter decoder as the detokenizer. This stage also learns a set of 8192 image token classes, which are then used to create a codebook. In addition to learning this visual vocabulary, The discriminator and a super resolution upsampler are trained to enhance image quality. Once the encoder-decoder framework has been pre-trained, the detokenizer is fine-tuned during the second stage training while keeping the tokenizer and codebook fixed to ensure consistency in the learned representations. The losses during this phase are the same as those used in VIT-VQGAN. Moving on to stage 2, the training of the encoder-decoder autoregressive model. Here, the text encoder is pre-trained. Then the encoder-decoder are trained together using softmax cross-entropy loss, which ensures that the model learns to predict the next image token effectively, based on the sequence of tokens generated by the tokenizer in stage 1. During inference, a text prompt is passed through a text encoder, which converts the input into text tokens. These tokens are then used by an autoregressive transformer decoder that generates the corresponding image tokens, incorporating classifier-free guidance to enhance alignment between the generated image and prompt. The image tokens are then subsequently converted from token space to image space by the detokenization process using VIT-VQGAN's decoder. Following detokenization, the generated image may be upsampled to achieve higher resolution. To ensure diversity and select the best outcomes, the model generates 16 images per text prompt. These images are then subjected to re-ranking based on alignment score of image and text embedding of the COCA model. The datasets used for evaluations are the MS COCO dataset and the COCO subset of the localized narratives dataset. The localized narratives dataset has much more detailed prompts as seen here. Then the authors also developed party prompts, which is a set of over 1,600 prompts, which each prompt associated with a broad category from 12 categories, for example, animals, vehicles, world knowledge, and abstract, and a challenge dimension from 11 dimensions, for example, basic, quantity, words, or symbols. Here are the FID score results on zero-shot and fine-tuned MS COCO and localized narrative COCO datasets when compared with other state-of-the-art text-to-image models at the time, as well as the retrieval baseline. So the retrieval baseline simply retrieves images from the training dataset based on an alignment score between the text prompt embedding and the image embeddings. As seen, Party outperforms other state-of-the-art models in terms of both zero-shot and fine-tuned FID scores. Here are some results based on human evaluations on the MS COCO dataset when compared with the XMC GAN model and the retrieval baseline, showing that Party outperforms XMC GAN in terms of image realism and image text match, and outperforming the retrieval baseline based on image text match. On the new Party prompts, results show that the larger 20 billion Party model outperforms the 3 billion model as well as the retrieval baseline. The next paper is PixArt Alpha, fast training of diffusion transformer for photorealistic text-to-image synthesis. So this paper aims to harness the capabilities of the diffusion transformer to train a text-to-image model comparable to the state-of-the-art models. The method is motivated by designing a training strategy to independently optimize 3 critical components: pixel dependency, text-image alignment, and image aesthetic quality. PixArt Alpha also tries to support high-resolution image synthesis up to 1024 pixels, achieving this with notably reduced training costs and improved efficiency. The core contributions of the paper are as follows. Firstly, the model's training time is remarkably short, requiring only 10.8% of the time needed for a Stable Diffusion version 1.5, while also using less than 1.25% of its training data. Second, it introduces this 3-stage training strategy, which enhances the process by concentrating on model initialization, followed by a targeted pre-training and a fine-tuning stage, with each stage designed to streamline specific subtasks. Third, the introduction of cross-attention modules within the diffusion transformer or DIT architecture improves text condition injection while also refining the entire computation process, particularly in the computation-intensive class condition branch. And finally, it leverages a large vision language model, LAVA, to auto-label dense pseudo captions. The first stage of the training strategy is to learn pixel dependency. This stage is dedicated to understanding the pixel distribution of natural images without the interference of text prompts, essentially teaching the model the inherent structure and coherence found within the visual data. It does this by employing a class condition diffusion transformer, DITXL2, with 28 transformer blocks that have been pre-trained on the ImageNet dataset. This methodology allows PixArt Alpha to capture the essence of visual information. The model is trained on 1 million images over 300,000 training steps. So this paper leverages the diffusion transformer architecture, which pivots an architectural change from the traditional UNet backbone of latent diffusion models to a transformer-based model. The diffusion transformer operates first by converting noise to linear layers and reshaping, followed by normalization and processing through multiple DIT blocks. These blocks are structured with multi-head self-attention and pointwise feed-forward layers, interspersed with scaling and normalization. The conditional inputs such as the diffusion time steps and class labels are incorporated into the transformer via a MLP. The adaptation of the VIT blocks, or vision transformer blocks, equipped with the adaptive layer norm layers, ensures flexible normalization. So furthermore, the integration of PixArt Alpha with this architecture utilizes a 256D frequency embedding, followed by a two-layer MLP. So stage 2 is centered on enhancing text-image alignment learning. The shift from pre-trained class-guided image generation to this text-to-image generation calls for accurate alignment between detailed text descriptions and generated images. So a significant challenge in this stage arises from the text captions in the datasets, which often lack informative content, are misaligned with their corresponding images, or present a long-tail distribution that makes learning from them difficult. So to counter these issues, PixArt Alpha implements a solution that involves creating highly informative text captions with the help of LAVA, a large vision language model. By leveraging LAVA in auto-labeling pipeline, PixArt Alpha aims to improve the informativeness of the text data, so thereby enhancing the training efficiency and alignment accuracy. So here are some examples of raw captions from the Lion dataset and Lava refined captions. As seen, refinements can deal with problems like text-image misalignment, deficient descriptions, and infrequent vocabulary, causing this long-tail characteristic. So here is the detailed dataset refinement process. So using Lava, the dataset undergoes this auto-labeling process with prompts that encourage informative descriptions. So particularly the prompt asks it to describe this image and its style in a very detailed manner. So SAM is used instead of Lion, since the segment anything dataset tends to lead to a more robust vocabulary demonstrated to a vocabulary analysis. So this analysis shows that Lava refined SAM and Lion datasets increase in the number of total nouns and the ratio of valid distinct noun to total distinct noun. So valid distinct noun means nouns that occur more frequently. And SAM Lava is able to outperform Lion Lava, so that's why it is used. In this stage, 10 million SAM captions are refined. So stage 3 of the PixArt Alpha training focuses on generating high-resolution images with a refined aesthetic quality. So this stage leverages fine-tuning on data with superior quality, specifically combining a 4 million image dataset from JourneyDB and a 10 million internal image dataset. Um, the training in this stage benefits from the foundational work established in the previous stages, which results in a faster convergence. So the table shows that there are 3 scales of resolution used for training in this stage. And as the resolution increases from 256 by 256 to 1024 by 1024, fewer training steps are needed in this stage, and with a decrease in batch size. And this reflects an optimization of the learning process due to the high quality of the input data and the cumulative knowledge from earlier training steps. So here are some design considerations presented in this paper. So it uses the DIT XL2 as the base architecture and 4.3 billion Flan T5 as the text encoder for conditional feature extraction, and also a pre-trained and frozen VAE encoder from latent diffusion model for latent feature extraction. And here within the DIT block, multi-head cross-attention is used to facilitate interactions between the model and text embeddings extracted from the language model. So the authors of PixArt Alpha modified the original adaptive layer norm layers in the diffusion transformer to make it more efficient. They found that linear projections in the adaptive layer norm layer module of the DIT account for a substantial proportion, which is 27% of the parameters. And this large number of parameters is not useful since the class condition is not employed in text-to-image generation model. So they proposed the adaptive layer norm single, where all n blocks share the same parameters for time conditions. Global MLP with layer-wise embeddings are used instead of layer-specific MLPs. So to adapt to this new structure, layer-specific trainable embeddings are introduced to adaptively adjust the shifts and scales in different blocks without the class condition. So this preserves the compatibility with pre-trained weights when initialized to yield the same scales and shifts as the pre-trained diffusion transformer. So here are some experimental results on the MS-COCO dataset comparing the FID scores with other state-of-the-art models. Although it doesn't achieve the lowest FID score, it does have the lowest number of parameters, training images, as well as number of GPU days. So here are some results on the T2ICOM bench, a benchmark for assessing alignment between text conditions and generated images. And this shows that PixArt Alpha is very competitive in the categories of attribute binding and object relationship, as well as complexity. So the authors also conducted experiments on human evaluations based on generated images from 300 prompts. For this, 50 participants ranked models based on perceptual quality and text-image alignment. As seen, the results show that PixArt Alpha outperforms other models in terms of both quality and alignment.
Before moving to the last paper, we want to think about what makes a good generation model. So as we see here, the diffusion models cannot do fast sampling, although it provides a good model coverage and diversity and produce high quality and high fidelity on the image. We wonder, are there any state-of-the-art methods that have diffusion models with fast sampling? This brings us to the final paper that we are presenting today, which is SDXL Turbo. It's showcasing a technique called ADD, which is an adversarial diffusion distillation, a new distillation technique for text-to-image models. And there are some special property of SDXL Turbo that is that this classifier-free guidance are not used here. And the main highlights of the paper is that it can do a single step image generation, which is extremely fast. It can be even done in real time, such that originally SDXL, it has to do like 50 steps, but in SDXL Turbo, you basically do it in one step. So intuitively, it's actually combining the superior sample quality from diffusion models, but also the inherent speed of GANs. So let's delve into this paper. But first, let's revisit the adversarial models, the generative adversarial networks, GANs. It has a generator which optimizes to synthesize samples that capture the distribution of training data. Then we also have a discriminator which optimizes to classify the real and fake data. So during the training process, a generator will generate a bunch of fake images, while the training set, the actual training data, and the fake data are both fed to the discriminator, so that the discriminator has to tell whether which one is fake or real. Both generator and discriminator are trained simultaneously in the case that both has to get better in each epoch during the training, just to make sure that they are in fair fights so that they can learn from each other. The objective is to learn at a point that discriminator was unable to tell whether the generator fake image is real or fake. So at that period of time, it means the generator has been successfully trained. And after that, the discriminator can be dumped into a garbage bin, and we only care about the generator. In SDXL Turbo, it actually has a student-teacher model, so it's like a distillation process, where the student is having like a relatively short time step, while the teacher model is using a long time step for scheduling. So what it does in the training process is that first you have the latent, which is basically computed by the forward diffusion process by adding noise progressively on it. Then you get the XS here. Then it got passed into the generator, which is the student model. We're going to train this. And it will generate an image that looks to be what we wanted here. Then it got fed into the discriminator to tell whether it's fake or not. This is very similar to the GAN methodology. But also at the same time, the synthesized output was added noise progressively again to fed into a teacher model, which is a freezing diffusion model, to try to generate again. But this time, it doesn't compute the gradient, and then it computes the distillation loss to see, which is like some kind of distance metric between the generated image from generator and also the generated image from the teacher diffusion model, so that it penalized the gradients in the student model, such that it was able to learn, the student was able to learn how to become more like the teacher model. In that case, it was expected the student could eventually perform better than teacher, while also fooling the discriminator, so that the discriminator was not able to tell it's true or fake. That means the student has been successfully become a good synthesizer. And then at generation process, this become like a one-pass model. Not necessarily one pass, but it can inference at a very short time step, such that you just simply fit a noise into it, and then with some kind of text conditioning, you can generate it with very low time step, such that it was able to compute in real time. So in detail, the generator was used a network, like a UNet again, a pixel space UNet as a generator, while the discriminator is a vision transformer with the dyno objective. And the teacher model, the paper used SDXL and also SDS 2.1 as a teacher model. For the training objective, they employ the traditional GAN the GAN laws, which is the adversarial laws, and then they use the hinge laws with the gradient penalty, which derives from the GP GAN paper. And for the distillation laws, it's simply a weighted L2 loss, which the CT is the alpha T according to the time step defined by them. So in summary, we covered 6 pivotal text-to-image models in this presentation, including latent diffusion model, which is the first work to use the latents, like the compressed latent, and also the cross-attention. Then we have ImageGen paper, which is a cascaded diffusion model to do text-to-image generation. Then next we have DAW-E2, which utilize the clip embeddings and the latents to synthesize high-quality image. Then we have Party, a transformer-based autoregressive model. And then we have PixArt Alpha, which is a diffusion transformer. Finally, we have a SDXL Turbo, which utilized the adversarial distillation from SDXL. We also did cover some common metrics for text-to-image models, including Fairchild inception distance, which measure the image fidelity, and also clip score to measure the image text alignment. In fact, there are more T2I models to explore. So you can see here there are more than 6 literatures that we just covered. And we hope people who listen to our presentation will raise more interest into this area. Thank you.